The storm had passed, but its memory lingered in the broken things left behind. Sirens wailed like mourning cries across the flattened town, their echo weaving through splintered trees and crumpled rooftops. Smoke still curled from broken power. Lines. A child's teddy bear lay soaked in mud, one eye missing, face pressed against a shattered sidewalk. Above it all hung a grey sky, bloated, silent, exhausted. Maya moved through it like a shadow. Her boots crunched glass and gravel as she scanned the wreckage. One hand gripped her radio. The other adjusted the collar of her EMT jacket, though no chill could reach what she no longer felt. There were cries, there was chaos, but Maya had long since learned to separate the noise outside from the storm within. She stepped over a fallen beam. A porch swing twisted in the wind, creaking like an old song. Somewhere ahead, a rescue crew flagged survivors. She didn't run toward them. She walked, because running meant feeling. And Maya had shut that door long ago. The disaster zone was familiar now. She'd seen it in hurricanes, floods, and wildfires. But this storm had struck more than land. Maya's movements were efficient, almost surgical. She knelt to check a man's pulse, applied pressure to a wound, nodded to a volunteer medic, and moved on. Her hands worked, her mind calculated, but her heart stayed still. Not since the last time. A memory flickered her brother, Liam, laughing, beneath a summer sky just before the tornado that took him. That same sky had turned black in minutes. She hadn't spoken his name in months. Instead, Maya kept walking, helping, saving, all while leaving her own grief buried beneath her uniform and protocols. It was easier that way, or so she believed. A woman sobbed as Maya led her to a medical tent. Another clutched her injured dog, begging Maya for help. She offered words, bandages, reassurances, but her voice came out flat measured, gentle, but hollow, like a wind-up doll who knew her lines. Grief surrounded her, yet she remained untouched by it, vital, stable. Minor trauma, she reported into the radio. Her voice didn't shake. Her fingers didn't tremble, but her eyes never lingered on anyone for long, because looking too closely meant remembering, and remembering hurts. She was just about to return to the van, the day already too full, when movement streaked across her. Vision, a blur of brown and black low to the ground. Fast, despite a limp wrist through the ruins, like it had a destination. A German shepherd. Maya's body froze. Something in the dog's frantic dash, its mud-caked coat, its focused gaze, shook her more than any cry she'd heard all day. It didn't look lost. It looked like it was looking for something, and in that split second, Maya's exhaustion faltered. Her fingers tightened around her radio. That dog wasn't running from something. It was running to something. She turned, squinting in the direction the shepherd had gone. Then she heard it. A long, low howl cut through the wind, not a bark, not a whimper, something raw, urgent. It wasn't painful. It was a plea. Maya raised her radio again. Unit 7, to base. Nothing but static. She lowered the device, slowly, heart knocking once, hard. The howl came again, more distant now but still deliberate, still desperate. It tugged at something under her ribs. For the first time all day, Maya stopped thinking about her checklist. She started listening. She hesitated only a second longer, before her boots shifted direction, toward the howl. She wasn't even sure why. Maybe instinct, maybe curiosity. But somewhere beneath her calm exterior, a thread had pulled loose, and it was leading her forward. She passed crushed fences and jagged windows, the world dimming behind her. With every step, the silence inside her cracked a little more. The shepherd's cry wasn't just a sound, it was a signal. It carried something no one else had shown her all day. Purpose, urgency, life. Maya pressed forward, brushing her hair. From her face, heart suddenly louder in her chest. She didn't know what she was walking into, but she knew this. She couldn't not go. Maya didn't know why she followed the dog. It wasn't protocol. She should have called it in, stayed with her unit, gone back to triage like she'd planned. But her legs moved before her mind caught up toward the shepherd, toward the ruins, toward something she couldn't name. The dog limped, yet each step carried urgency, not wild panic. Intent. "Where are you going?" she muttered aloud, mostly to herself. No answer, of course, only the crunch of her boots over wet gravel and fractured wood. Still, she followed. Branches scraped her arms as she ducked beneath a bent beam. Smoke clung to the air, bitter and raw. Maya coughed, wiping grit from her cheek, but kept moving. She told herself she'd stop once she lost sight of it, but she never did. Every time it rounded a corner, it reappeared just ahead, like it knew exactly where to go and that she needed to follow. It wasn't just the dog's direction, it was his awareness. He kept looking over his shoulder, pausing just long enough for her to catch up. Not fearful, not even cautious, just ... waiting. Their eyes met several times, and each glance felt like a silent question. "Are you still coming?" Maya's heart beat a little faster, not from exertion, but something stranger. The dog wasn't leading her astray. He had a reason. She could feel it. Once, he stopped entirely at a crooked sidewalk slab, watching her approach with his head tilted slightly. Maya exhaled, her voice softer now. "All right, Shadow," she said, naming him without thinking. "Where are you taking me?" The shepherd blinked, then turned forward again and trotted ahead. They passed what used to be driveways, garden fences, the bones of homes now flattened and drowned in debris. Mailboxes still stood upright like stubborn soldiers. Maya carefully stepped over sharp metal siding, the ground unsteady beneath her boots. She scanned for other dangers, for fallen lines, unstable walls, but her focus kept pulling back to the dog. Something about his presence steadied her even here. Among splintered memories and broken lives, she didn't know his name, his story, who he belonged to, but in this ghost town of silence and ruin, he was the only thing moving with purpose, the only one. Besides her, still searching, without warning, the shepherd stopped. He let out a low, urgent whine and bolted to a collapsed structure, a house crushed inwards like a paper cup. Then he began to dig. His paws tore through ash and dirt with ferocity, nails scrabbling against wood and concrete. Splinters flew. His chest heaved with effort. Hey, stop." Maya ran toward him, unsure if he was injured, panicking, or had just lost his mind. But the dog didn't stop. He let out a growl, not at her, but at the rubble itself, as if it were the enemy keeping something from him. Maya's voice shook. "What are you then?" It hit her. He wasn't random. He wasn't lost. He was digging for something, or someone. She dropped to her knees beside him, pushing aside wet insulation and bent nails. Her fingers bled, but she didn't feel it. Shadow didn't slow. Neither did she, not anymore. His paws were red now. Maya could see fresh streaks across the grey rubble, small but sharp cuts, maybe from glass or twisted nails. The shepherd whimpered once, but never stopped. Each dig was labored, every breath heavy, but there was a fire behind his eyes. A mission, Maya whispered. You'll hurt yourself. But even as she said it, she knew he wouldn't quit. He was driven by something deeper, something that didn't care about pain. She reached out, gently brushing ash from his face, and for a heartbeat, he paused to look at her. His eyes burned with loyalty, not fear. Then he went right back to digging. Maya grabbed her radio. Unit 7 to base. I need a rescue team at static. She adjusted the frequency. Nothing but crackle and dead air. She glanced back at Shadow, who had pushed half his body under a pile of beams now, tail still wagging faintly as he dug. No time to wait. She set the radio down and began pulling boards beside him, the weight straining. Her arms, her breath came in gasps, mixing with the shepherd's heavy panting. There was no backup, just them. Then it came, a faint cry, thin, muffled but unmistakably human. Maya stopped cold. Her chest tightened. Shadow barked once, sharply, and began pawing faster, frantically clearing space. Maya threw debris aside, her fingers scraping against gravel and dirt. The cry came again, closer this time. Weak, a child's voice. Oh my God, she whispered. There's someone down there. She leaned into the hole, heart pounding. Hang on, we hear you were coming. Shadow nudged her arm gently, then returned to digging. He'd brought her here for a reason, and now, that reason had a name, a voice, a life, for a moment. Maya couldn't move. All she saw was Liam, her brother, trapped under a crushed truck, rain pouring down as she screamed his name. She'd been too late then, but now, Shadow barked again, eyes locked on hers, and, just like that, the memory shattered. Maya moved not as a medic, not even as a sister, but as someone who had just found her reason to fight again. The storm above had passed, but in the crumbled world around them, the real storm was just beginning. Maya knelt beside the shepherd, hands digging into the wreckage where the child's voice had whispered seconds ago. Her fingers moved fast, instinctively, scanning for heat, movement, life. Beside her, the dog never stopped. No growling, no barking, just digging, focused, present. They worked together in silence, like they'd done it before, like they understood each other without a single command. Maya didn't speak, not at first. There was no time, but her heart, long locked away, started to pulse with something foreign. Connection. Dust clung to her eyelashes. Splinters cut her palms. But she didn't stop, because the shepherd hadn't stopped. And if he could keep going, so could she. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full of effort, of breath, of purpose, and for the first time in a long time, Maya didn't feel alone. Maya's medical kit was back in the van. So was her radio, and no one knew where she was. But none of that mattered now. She looked over at the dog mud, caked, trembling slightly, but determined. The beam they'd moved had opened a pocket of air. Beneath it, a child's shoe. Then a hand, small, motionless. Hold on, kid, she whispered. She reached in, checking for a pulse. Faint, but there, the dog didn't bark, didn't move. He just stayed by her side, panting heavily, eyes watching every motion. You and me, she said under her breath, as if cementing a pact. We're all he's got. She didn't need a partner with a name tag or credentials. She had this dog. As she shifted another board, the child Ethan let out a weak cough. Maya smiled for the first time in hours, and the shepherd wagged his tail once. It was enough. Someone raised you right, Maya muttered. Still working. The words came unprompted, as if she needed to fill the space or calm the storm inside her chest. You're not just some stray, are you? The dog cocked his head, ears twitching, as if trying to understand her tone, not her words. She kept talking. Maybe to him, maybe to herself. I used to think storms took everything from people, she whispered. Then I met one that left something behind. Her voice cracked on the last word. She didn't even try to hide it. The shepherd pressed closer to her leg, warmth through her soaked uniform. Not demanding anything, just being there, and Maya let the silence settle again. Softer this time. Somewhere under the surface, a wall in her heart chipped. Just slightly. Her arm jerked suddenly as she cut it on a jagged piece of wood. Blood welled up, fast and warm. Damn. It, she hissed, squeezing the wound, before she could wrap it. The shepherd gently nudged her wrist with his nose. Then, tenderly, he licked the wound. Once, twice. Maya didn't pull away. She looked at him, stunned not by the action, but by the emotion behind it. Concern, care, as if he could feel her pain, not just see it. You're something else, she said softly, managing a tired laugh. The dog didn't respond, just sat beside her again, eyes locked on Ethan. Ethan stirred beneath the debris. His breathing was shallow. His skin is pale. Maya's hand trembled as she reached for her empty belt. No tourniquet, no gauze, no stethoscope. She looked back the way she came far. Too far. I need my bag, she muttered, glancing at the dog. But I can't move him. Her eyes met the shepherd's. I need you to stay. She said it like a command, but it felt like a prayer. I'll be back. She said again, I promise. She stood slowly, heart pounding. If he left, if he ran, if he panicked, could mean Ethan's life. Maya backed away step by step, never breaking eye contact. The dog didn't move. She ran. Maya returned, breathless kit in hand, and he was still there, exactly where she left. Him curled beside Ethan, his body blocking the wind, his eyes wide and alert. He'd stayed. Relief burst in her chest so fast it felt like pain. Good boy, she whispered, voice thick. The shepherd thumped his tail once, just once, as if to say, of course. She dropped to her knees, tearing open her supplies, checking vitals, and stabilizing the child. She worked fast, but her hands no longer shook. She had help, and help had 4 legs, a loyal heart, and a name she hadn't yet learned, but already trusted. Maya cleaned Ethan's wounds and secured a splint to his leg. His eyelids fluttered, but he didn't speak. The shepherd remained beside him, unmoving except to lean closer when Ethan whimpered in pain. You're okay now, she murmured. You've got us. She realized what she'd said only after it left her lips. Us. Not me. Us. There was something comforting in that dot together. They created a rhythm, Maya working, the dog watching, the child breathing. It was strange, how normal. It felt how natural. And somehow, in the middle of wreckage and fear and exhaustion, that unspoken rhythm became the calm in the chaos. Minutes later, a rescue crew arrived. Stretchers, medics, voices as they lifted Ethan onto the gurney. His hand reached out, weak but determined. His fingers curled into the shepherd's fur. Shadow, he whispered, barely audible. The dog's ears perked. Then came a soft whine, quiet, almost mournful. Shadow licked Ethan's cheek, one final, tender reassurance. And in that moment, Maya knew they weren't strangers thrown together by fate. They were family reunited by something stronger than storms, paperwork, or time. As the medics wheeled Ethan away, Shadow followed a few steps, then stopped, waiting for Maya's signal. She knelt and placed a hand on his head. His fur was matted, tangled with dirt and blood, but beneath it was warmth, strength, and something steady. "He's yours, isn't he?" she asked softly. Shadow's eyes met hers, and something passed between them, an understanding that went deeper than words. She could have walked away, handed the dog off, let someone else figure it out, but she didn't, because somewhere in this broken town, among shattered homes and broken hearts, a boy had called for help, and Shadow had answered. Shadow hadn't just saved Ethan, he'd saved Maya too, from numbness, from isolation, from forgetting what it meant to care. She stood, and Shadow stood with her. They followed the gurney together. Not just a medic, not just a dog, but something more, something that couldn't be unspoken anymore. 2 days after the rescue, Maya stood outside the emergency shelter, watching Shadow rest by Ethan's feet. That's when the voice came. "That dog's mine." She turned. A tall man approached, shoulders squared, papers in hand. His voice carried authority and something colder beneath it. "Name's Tom Cardenas. That dog, his name's Ranger. I trained him for search and rescue. Got the papers to prove it." Maya glanced down. Shadow Ranger had risen to his feet, but his body didn't move toward the man. If anything, he pressed subtly closer to Ethan. "He was with a family," Maya replied cautiously. "He found a child during the storm." "He was stolen," Tom snapped. "Wandered off during a training exercise months ago. Probably taken in by someone who couldn't handle him. He's highly skilled, not a house pet." Ethan looked up, confused. "He's not a ranger. He's Shadow. He's mine." Maya didn't answer. Her hand instinctively found Shadow's head. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was a threat. Later that afternoon, Maya sat in the back office with Tom and 2 officials. Tom's papers looked real: certificates, ownership records, even a faded photo of Shadow in a harness. But something didn't sit right. Shadow stood by Maya, eyes on Tom, not alert, not aggressive, just wary. When Tom knelt down and called, "Come here, boy," Shadow didn't move. Not one step. Instead, he backed up. Maya's heart thudded. She'd seen dogs run toward their handlers with joy even after long separations. But Shadow's tail stayed low, his ears pinned. The look in his eyes wasn't confusion, it was fear. Tom's smile thinned. "He'll warm back up once he's home." Maya wasn't convinced. Documents could lie, but dogs never did. Maya sat outside with Shadow that evening, watching Ethan sleep inside the medic tent. Shadow's head rested on her thigh. She remembered the first time he'd looked at her, not as a threat, not even as a stranger, but as someone he could trust. She remembered his patience beside Ethan, the way he never left, the way he'd waited when she told him to. No hesitation, no leash, just understanding. Maya stroked behind his ears. "You don't need a uniform to prove who you are," she murmured. "You already did." Shadow exhaled, his body rising and falling softly against her leg. It wasn't the kind of trust you could train. It was the kind you earned. She'd seen too many people lose what they loved. Families separated, pets never found, grief folded into paperwork. Now she was being asked to return a dog who didn't want to go. But Tom had the legal upper hand, and the shelter staff were leaning his way. "It's not your call," someone had told her. "If he wants to file, there's not much we can do." Maya sat alone on a cot, Shadow curled at her feet, her chest tight with frustration. What if the system failed again? What if this time she watched something good get taken away? She did nothing. She looked down at Shadow. He wasn't just a search dog, or a rescue animal. He was a survivor, and now he needed someone to fight for him. That night, just past 2 a.m., Maya awoke to faint footsteps outside her tent. She slipped on her boots, heart still raw from the day's debates, and stepped outside. Shadow stood just beyond the floodlight, pacing, his body tense, tail low, head lifted like he was listening to something far beyond the human ear. "Shadow," she whispered. He looked back, one size locked with hers. Then he bolted. No bark, no warning, just gone into the tree line. Maya didn't think. She ran, branches, whipped her arms, mud sucked at her shoes. The light faded behind her. She followed Popprint's breath, ragged. "Please," she muttered to herself. "Please don't be running away." But deep down, she knew better. He wasn't running from anything. He was running to something. Again, the woods were thick with humidity and silence. Maya stopped only when she heard it, a faint, choking cry. Her flashlight shook as she aimed it toward the sound. Shadow stood at the base of a fallen oak, pouring gently at a blanket of leaves. Beneath the soil and roots, a tiny hand emerged, barely moving. "Oh my God." She dropped beside the child, a girl no older than 5. Her lips were cracked, her eyes barely open. Shadow didn't move. He stood over the child like a sentinel. Maya grabbed her radio. This time, the signal went through. "This is Unit 7. If I've got another child, female, unaccounted for, still breathing." Shadow sat down slowly, his body forming a protective crescent around the girl. Maya choked back a sob. This wasn't a chance. This wasn't training. This was instinct. This was heart. The girl was stabilized and rushed back to base. With Maya at her side, Shadow trotted behind the stretcher, never straying far. When they reached the tent, Ethan stirred. "Shadow," he whispered, seeing the familiar figure behind Maya. Shadow walked over to Ethan, gave a low, gentle whine, then returned to the girl's cot. He laid beside her, head resting near her shoulder, as if to say, "You're safe now." Maya knelt beside him, a realization settling deep in her chest. This wasn't a dog who needed to be claimed. He'd already chosen, and every time a soul cried for help, he answered, not as a pet, as a guardian. Back at the base, the case was reopened. Tom's claim under review. New questions were being asked, but Ethan had no doubts. At a hearing table set up in the shelter's temporary command post, he spoke with a clarity far beyond his years. "He's not just a dog," Ethan said softly. "He's my best friend. He came back for me. He stayed, even when I couldn't ask him to." Maya watched Shadow sit beside the boy, completely still. No one prompted Ethan. No one coached him. He didn't talk about ownership. He talked about love. Maya stood before the review board with photos, records, and the incident report from the second rescue. "This is a dog who finds people, not because he's trained to, but because he can't help it," she said. "He didn't return to some handler. He returned to a child who needed him." She handed over a final document, proof that the girl in the woods had been missing for 2 days, and Shadow had found her when no one else had. "He's not a lost asset. He's not a piece of property. She turned to the boy beside her. He's family. The board went quiet. Tom sat stiffly, jaw clenched, but said nothing. They didn't need more later that day. The ruling came through. Shadow would stay with Ethan's family. As they left the tent, Ethan hugged Shadow tightly. Maya smiled through the lump in her throat. Shadow looked up at her, then gently pressed his nose into her hand. He was home, not because someone said so, because love had led him there. The house was small, patched together since the storm, with boards still leaning against the side and a blue tarp stretched over part of the roof. But it was full of laughter, soft voices, and something Maya hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. She stepped up the porch quietly, holding a bag of supplies in one hand and a slightly nervous smile in the other. The door opened before she knocked. Maya. Ethan's mum welcomed her with a warmth that felt like sunlight. Inside, the air smelled like cinnamon and fresh laundry. Ethan sat curled on the couch, a book in his lap and Shadow lying at his feet. Both looked up at the same time. Shadow's ears perked. His tail thumped once against the floor, and Maya's heart, which had been so heavy for so long, eased just a little more. Later, Maya followed Ethan to his room. It was simple bare walls, a single shelf, and a nightstand. What caught her eye was the photo frame beside the bed, a snapshot of Shadow, moody eyes, focused, standing proudly beside Ethan in front of the relief tent. It wasn't just a picture, it was a memory frozen in glass, of the day they both made it out, of the day they found each other again. Maya reached out, her fingers brushing the corner of the frame. "You kept it," she said softly. Ethan nodded. "He watches me sleep now, every night." The frame wasn't just decoration. It was a symbol of protection and of survival. Shadow was different now, not in a way that made him unfamiliar, but in a way that made him whole. He still listened, alert to every sound, but his movements were slower, more deliberate. His eyes, once so wide with urgency, now held peace. Maya watched him circle Ethan's bed once before settling down. His body curved just beneath the window. "You've got him trained," she joked gently. Ethan grinned. "I think he's training me." Maya chuckled, but there was a quiet awe in her gaze. The storm had stripped so much away, it had left behind this bond, stronger than fear, stronger than memory. A boy, a dog, both survivors, both healing, together. Before she left, Maya crouched beside Shadow one last time. He raised his head, watching her with those deep, knowing eyes. She reached out slowly, brushing a hand over his fur. "Hey, you," he leaned in. Then, without a sound, he placed one paw gently on her knee. The motion was small, soft, but it meant everything. Maya blinked, her eyes stinging in the corners. "I never got to say thank you," she whispered. "Not just for them, for me." Shadow didn't move. He didn't need to. The gesture said it all. Gratitude, recognition, trust. It was the first time she'd felt truly seen in months, not by a person, by a soul. As Maya stood, Ethan spoke. "He still sleeps by my bed every night," he said matter-of-factly, like it was obvious. "Why's that?" she asked, smiling gently. "Just in case another storm comes." The words hit like a quiet bell. There was no fear in them, only truth. Shadow didn't keep the storm away. He helped Ethan face it. Maya knelt one more time, gently tugging the blanket up over Ethan's legs. "You're lucky, you know," she said. Ethan grinned sleepily. I know. And Maya knew too, because that kind of bond doesn't come from luck. It comes from loyalty that doesn't leave outside. Maya paused on the porch, her bag over her shoulder. The late afternoon sun cast warm shadows across the yard. A breeze lifted the leaves, and for the first time in what felt like forever, her chest felt open, breath moved easier. She still carried grief, but not alone anymore. Some of it had been carried by a dog with tired eyes and steady paws. The rest by a boy who refused to let love get buried under loss. Maya stepped off the porch, her boots crunching softly on gravel, and with every step something lifted. Not just relief, but something closer to healing. Maya, she turned at the gate. Ethan stood by the doorway, waving. You're a hero too, Miss Maya. Her breath caught. For a moment, she wanted to correct him. She wasn't the one who found the boy, who waited, who followed a cry in the dark. But then Shadow appeared beside Ethan, tail wagging softly, eyes steady. And for the first time, Maya didn't shrink from the word. She nodded once, handing over her heart. Thanks, kid. Because maybe, just maybe, being a hero wasn't about what you did. It was about who you chose to stand beside. Maya turned one last time before leaving. Shadow sat quietly in the doorway. No bark, no movement. Just watching her with that same calm gaze he had when they met. She didn't wave. She didn't speak. She just looked and let herself feel it. The peace, the trust, the quiet, steady love of a creature who had asked for nothing but given everything. He wasn't just a search dog. He was a teacher, a mirror, a reminder that even after the darkest storms, there are still reasons to follow the sound. And sometimes, if you listen closely enough, a dog will lead you home. Maya once believed trust had to be earned through consistency, through time, through logic. But Shadow hadn't followed those rules. He had appeared in the wreckage like an echo of something lost, and slowly, piece by piece, he had pulled her out too. Not with force, not with demand, but with stillness, with presence, with a loyalty that didn't ask for permission. She hadn't been trusted easily, but the trust Shadow offered wasn't loud or rushed. It simply stood there until she finally reached out. Sometimes, the greatest rescuers don't shout. They wait, quiet, steady, until you're ready to be found. The tornado had ripped homes apart, but Maya knew now it wasn't the only kind of storm. Some came without wind or rain. Some came in memories, in silence, in the kind of emptiness that follows loss and lingers long after the sirens fade. And those storms, they were harder to see, but just as dangerous. And it was Shadow, not a human voice, not a therapy session, who helped her weather it. Because healing doesn't always begin with understanding. Sometimes it begins with something warm pressing against your side. Shadow hadn't led Maya toward anyone else. He had led her back to herself. That's what still lingered most. Not the search, not even the rescue. It was that slow shift inside her, the quiet redirection of a compass that had spun without direction for too long. Grief had taken her sense of purpose. Shadow didn't hand it back in a dramatic moment. He simply walked beside her until she remembered how to move again. That was his gift. He didn't just point the way forward. He reminded her that there was one. Ethan once believed the storm had taken everything, his room, his quiet, his dog. But love, real love, has a way of finding the cracks. Shadow came back through one of them, not as a pet, not as a project, but as something eternal, something that knew how to return. They didn't speak of the storm often. Ethan didn't need to. Shadow's presence spoke for them both. He was more than comfortable. He was continuity, and Ethan, in his innocence, said it best when he whispered, "He didn't find me in the storm. He found me after." Maya once saw heroes as people in uniforms, on call, rushing into chaos. But now, she knew better. Sometimes, the bravest souls walk quietly, on four legs, with noses pressed to the ground, ears twitching at every sound, not for themselves, but for others. They don't ask to lead, they just do. Shadow had walked her out of silence. He had waited when she didn't know how to move. And he had reminded a child that safety can return even after everything is gone. So, when Maya tells the story now, she never starts with the tornado. She starts with the dog, and the day she followed him home.